Imagine living in a city where you know the enemy is coming, and there is no escape, no rescue army, no secret tunnel, no miracle coming, just a slow march of thousands of soldiers surrounding your home, and the terrifying question every human being must eventually face: do you surrender or do you die free? This is the forgotten story of Masada, one of the most powerful and tragic moments in ancient history. A story about courage, leadership, pride, fear, and the dangerous line between heroism and destruction. Before we go deeper into this story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, because here, history is not just something that happened long ago. It is a mirror that reflects the choices we still make today. Our story begins more than 2,000 years ago, during the time of the Roman Empire. Rome was the most powerful empire on earth. Its armies were disciplined, ruthless, and unstoppable. They conquered nation after nation, spreading Roman law, Roman culture, and Roman control across the ancient world. But not everyone accepted Roman rule. In the land of Judea, tensions had been building for years. Many Jewish people resented Roman occupation. Heavy taxes, cultural interference, and harsh Roman governors made life increasingly unbearable. Eventually, anger exploded into open rebellion. The year was 66 AD. Jewish rebels rose up against Rome in what became known as the First Jewish-Roman War. At first, the rebels achieved surprising victories. They pushed Roman forces out of several cities and briefly reclaimed control of Jerusalem. But Rome was not an empire that tolerated rebellion. Soon, massive Roman legions marched into Judea to crush the uprising. These soldiers were some of the most feared fighters in the ancient world, disciplined, relentless, highly organized, and determined to send a message to anyone who dared challenge Rome. City after city fell. Thousands died. By 70 AD, the Romans captured Jerusalem and destroyed the Second Temple, one of the most sacred sites in Jewish history. For many rebels, the war was already lost. But one group refused to surrender. They fled to a place that seemed almost impossible to conquer, a massive desert fortress called Masada. Masada stood on top of a towering rock plateau overlooking the Dead Sea. The cliffs were nearly vertical. The desert around it was brutal and unforgiving. The fortress had been built decades earlier by King Herod the Great. He had turned the mountain into an almost impenetrable stronghold. Massive walls surrounded the top. Storehouses were filled with food. Water reservoirs collected rain for years. From above, Masada looked like a giant stone ship floating over the desert. To the rebels who escaped there, it seemed like the perfect last refuge. Around 960 men, women, and children settled inside the fortress. Their leader was a man named Eleazar ben Yair. Eleazar believed something deeply powerful and deeply dangerous. He believed that freedom was more important than life itself. To him, living under Roman rule was worse than death, and he convinced the people of Masada to adopt this belief as well. For several years they held the fortress. The Roman Empire had many other problems to deal with across its vast territories, so Masada remained untouched. But Rome never forgets rebellion. Eventually, the Romans returned. In 73 AD, the Roman governor Lucius Flavius Silva marched toward Masada with the 10th Legion. Nearly 8,000 Roman soldiers surrounded the mountain. The rebels watched from the fortress walls as Roman camps appeared across the desert below. The siege had begun, but conquering Masada would not be easy. The cliffs were too steep for direct assault. Roman soldiers could not simply climb the mountain, and attacking the gates would require reaching the top first. So the Romans did something extraordinary. They began building a massive siege ramp. Thousands of soldiers and slaves worked day and night, carrying stones and dirt across the desert, slowly, painfully. They constructed a giant ramp against the side of the mountain. Week after week, the ramp grew higher. The people inside Masada watched in silence. They knew what it meant. The Romans were patient. They had time. Eventually, the ramp reached the fortress wall. Now the Romans could bring up their siege tower and battering ram. The final attack was coming. Inside Masada, fear spread through the community. They knew what happened to rebels captured by Rome. Crucifixion, slavery, public execution. The Roman Empire punished rebellion brutally to discourage future uprisings. Eleazar gathered the people together, and there, inside the fortress, he delivered a speech that would become one of the most controversial moments in ancient history. He told them that death was better than slavery, that dying free was better than living under Roman rule. He argued that surrender would mean humiliation, suffering, and the destruction of their identity. But if they chose death, Rome would never truly defeat them. It was a powerful argument, a terrifying one. According to the ancient historian Josephus, the people agreed. They made a decision that still shocks historians today. Instead of surrendering to the Romans, they would take their own lives. Men embraced their families. Parents looked at their children. Friends said goodbye to each other. One by one, the people of Masada prepared for the end. They burned their possessions to prevent Roman soldiers from taking them. Then they followed a tragic plan. A small group of men would kill the others. Then those men would draw lots. One would be chosen to kill the rest. And finally, the last man would take his own life. When Roman soldiers finally broke through the walls the next morning, they expected a fierce battle. But instead, they found silence. The fortress was empty of life. Hundreds of bodies lay across the stone floors. The defenders of Masada had chosen death over surrender. Only 2 women and 5 children survived by hiding in a cave, later telling the Romans what had happened. And just like that, one of the most dramatic acts of resistance in ancient history was over. But the story of Masada raises a question that historians still debate today. Was this an act of heroic courage, or a tragic mistake driven by pride and desperation? On one hand, the people of Masada refused to let an empire decide their fate. They believed freedom was worth everything. Their story became a powerful symbol of resistance for generations. But on the other hand, nearly 1,000 lives ended that night. Children, families, people who might have survived if surrender had been chosen. History often celebrates bravery, but Masada reminds us that bravery without wisdom can sometimes lead to destruction. The past does not give us simple answers. It gives us complicated human stories, and those stories force us to ask difficult questions. What is true freedom? When is resistance heroic? And when does it become tragedy? How far should a leader go when asking people to sacrifice everything? And most importantly, how often does pride push human beings toward choices they cannot undo? Masada still stands today in the deserts of Israel. Tourists climb the ancient fortress and look out over the same cliffs. Where the Roman legions once waited, the wind still moves across the stones. The silence still fills the mountain, and the story remains a warning echoing across 2,000 years, because the greatest battles in history are not always fought between armies. Sometimes they are fought inside the human mind, between courage and pride, between survival and honor, between life and the fear of losing identity. Masada reminds us that history is not just about empires and wars. It is about human choices, and those choices can shape destinies for centuries. If this story made you think differently about history, subscribe to the channel, because here we explore the forgotten events that reveal the deepest truths about human nature. And now we want to hear from you. If you were inside Masada that night, would you have chosen surrender? Or would you have chosen freedom no matter the cost? Tell us in the comments, because sometimes the most important questions in history still don't have easy answers.